Hello, 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 and welcome in to this week's edition of The Walkthrough. I'm your host, intern Joe Machika. It is Sunday night, March 3rd. There's a big weekend of Gamecock athletics action to get to, plus plenty of talk from the week that was. Furrey hired as the new wide receivers coach at South Carolina. Mike Uva should be joining me pretty shortly to talk about all that. And then obviously South Carolina basketball, the women's basketball remains undefeated, completes the perfect regular season against Tennessee today. Gamecock baseball losing 2 to Clemson, and then Gamecocks men's basketball taking care of business as well. Before we get to all of the coverage, obviously, from this weekend, I do want to talk to you guys about our sponsors, trying a new thing, kicking it off with our ads. So first off, let me talk to you about our good friends over at Liberty Tax. Tax ID is that uncertain feeling you get right before doing your taxes, but you don't have to go through it alone. The tax team at Liberty Tax in Irmo, Lexington, and Columbia will walk you through the process, clear up any confusion, and guarantee you'll get the biggest possible refund or your money back. It's tax time. If you're in a hurry for your refund, call on the tax team at Liberty Tax. They're fast, accurate, and guaranteed. On the other hand, if you think you might be owing Uncle Sam, talk to the Liberty Tax team to make sure you're not paying more than you should owe. They'll find every possible deduction for you. Locally owned and operated, staffed by tax professionals from your neighborhood, open 9 to 9 on weekdays and 9 to 5 on Saturdays with multiple service options. Start through the Liberty Tax mobile app or through the desktop portal. Make an appointment or just walk in. Give a call to upload your tax documents, and when you come in, your return will be ready to review and sign. Give them a call on your screen right now. And for those listening, 803-462-5576. Once again, 803-462-5576 for all of your tax needs. This show is also brought to you by our good friend Clint Hammond of the Movement Mortgage Network. He's above us on all of our Gamecock Central live programming. In need of help with your mortgage, call on our good friend Clint Hammond of the Movement Mortgage Network. He's been in the mortgage industry since 2003, which allows him to help everyone from the first-time home buyer to the complicated and complex jumbo buyer. Whether you're looking to purchase a new home or refinance, nothing is more important than a well-thought-out financial strategy that comes with five-star customer service. He's even helped out our very own Wes Mitchell and former Gamecock quarterback Perry with their mortgages. So give our guy Clint a call. His number's above us, 803-771-6933. So yeah, plenty to talk about from this weekend and this week. I guess we can start with baseball. Start at the top with baseball. Nick Babb asked, so what is the scenarios for us to win the SEC title? Or for basketball, sorry. I thought this was baseball comment. Yeah, for the SEC basketball, I think you just need to beat Tennessee and then beat Mississippi State. You need to, I think, win out. And then I think you need a Tennessee loss, I believe, maybe two, or maybe a Bama loss in there too as well. I think it comes down to Bama losing another game for us to win the SEC regular season title in basketball. It's going to be a pretty interesting week. Not this next week, but the week after. You got the SEC tournament, and we'll talk about all that, all the prep on this show. I will be in Nashville along with Jack Veltri and then Jackson Randall, our photographer, and Mike Uva will also be with us. So it should be a lot of fun in Nashville. South Carolina obviously prepares to take on the SEC tournament. They've been winning as of late. After that loss to LSU, they really responded well. This team was starting to get written off again. Not by everybody. Obviously, they were still ranked and everything. But this team has done a really good job of responding to back-to-back losses. You got blown out by Auburn. And then you come back and you lose again to LSU, at home. All these games are blending together here. But then you beat Ole Miss on the road, which was big. Zach Davis, big role in that one. And then Texas A&M, again, Zach Davis, able to get you a game-winning, buzzer beater shot, whatever. And then, at home at Florida, you trailed for a lot of this game, right? Darius Rucker in the building, plenty of people watching and stuff like that, engaged in Gamecock men's basketball. And so you were able to get the win, right? You trailed for a large portion of that game, and you were able to find a way to get it done. Michi Johnson, led the way, obviously. It was his world, and we were living in it last night, or at least yesterday. And again, I'll get to the baseball because there was baseball played yesterday and today as well. But I did want to talk about Michi first. He finished the game with, as I'm pulling it up right now, finished the game with 25. 10 of 15 from the field, 2 of 5 from 3, both threes in the second half. And then also finished with 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals as well. And again, that's something we talk about a lot on all of our Gamecock Central live programs. Michi Johnson's defense is something that doesn't get talked about. Got 2 steals. Talon Cooper had 4 steals himself as well. This team played defense. It was huge. Florida was coming out of the gates and really, really gunning for you in South Carolina. It was their first like real like come from behind victory against a really good opponent in Florida, ranked opponent in Florida as well. You've got Tennessee on Tuesday, which certainly isn't going to be an easy task by any means. But students are also on spring break, so the energy isn't going to quite be there. I'm not doubting the Colonial Life faithful in the slightest, but it's just not going to be the same with as many students on board and in the building as you would. So yeah, it's South Carolina. They obviously you got to beat Tennessee to win the SEC, Nick. I think that's the main point here is like beat Tennessee, and then you can't fumble the bag there. Your last game on the 9th on Saturday night, this upcoming Saturday, against Mississippi State on the road. It's a game you should win and take care of business. But if you can find a way to beat Tennessee again, a lot of people are going to be talking about the Gamecocks. A lot of people on a national stage, so that's going to be big and interesting to see how South Carolina fares this weekend, right, or this week against Tennessee. And again, if they can get the job done against Mississippi State, they should be in a pretty good spot afterwards. Excuse me. Just coming off a cold. But yeah, so South Carolina men's basketball, again, feeling good. Darius Rucker was in the crowd last night or yesterday. Looks really good as well. Really good come from behind victory. These guys are playing well. The culture is still intact, but a lot of it comes down to Tennessee on Tuesday. So if anyone has any more basketball comments, feel free to hit me. And then obviously Gamecock women's basketball remaining perfect with a win over Tennessee today. That was very big win for Dawn Staley and her squad. Didn't expect anything different at this point, right? It was at home. It was good to get a win over Tennessee, but Tennessee is not quite the team that they used to be on, especially under Summit and in the dynasty. South Carolina is taking over that, I guess, SEC dynasty, if you will. But closing that one out, you win by 8 points. Obviously, it was closer than you would have liked, but you got the job done. Hard fought win too. Cardoso and Pau lead the way on senior day. Shout out to the seniors too. It's a hard act to follow when you're following the freshies, probably the greatest basketball class for women's basketball, arguably ever. So shout out to Pau and Cardoso for being able to lead this senior class through. Sanaya Fagan, played 18 minutes, scored, but yeah, Cardoso was the main story here. 18 points, 14 rebounds, another double for her. She continues her run, right? Dawn Staley and the bigs, and then you have all of the guards continuing their strong play as well. It's really big when you can have such good guard play, especially in March. But Cardoso has been great. Everyone really has been great for Dawn Staley's squad so far, and it's hard to talk about this team because they're really they keep winning, right? Obviously today, you wish they could have done a little bit more, but they're going to use this as essentially a loss, right? This Tennessee squad was good. They gave them games in both of their both of their contests this season. So this Tennessee, Connor says his baseball team is a bunch of imposters. Brutal showing this weekend. Yeah, I mean, I think the game at Founders Park would have helped out a bunch because I think you're probably going to win that game. This team was amped for the opportunity to have Clemson at Founders Park, and then with the rain out, I think it kind of threw off the energy. At Segra Park, they were ready to go. Everyone was ready to go, but it's different getting up for a game like that. So the reschedule, you obviously need to take one at this point, right? Because you weren't able to take one and have a chance at the series when it comes back around in May, I believe is going to be the rescheduled date. But the one at Segra yesterday and again today, you had some late inning heroics, but I'll talk about the game last night and particularly because you were dead in the water for a while, and so yeah. Clark, appreciate the comment. Yeah, good time slot for a local sports talk show. You got the audience yourself. Most talk shows run bank hours, including weekends and holidays off. Yeah, I appreciate it. I try to, just Sundays at 7. It's the best time to recap everything. Started with football, allowed me some time to, get into things and really get into the nitty gritty of it all before football. But yeah, Connor, yeah, I agree and I appreciate it. But yeah, so at Segra, right, it was tough because both teams were going to come, both teams were going to come prepared. And both teams came prepared, right? Clemson obviously a little bit more so than South Carolina, but South Carolina battled back in that game, right? Ethan Petrie's 2-run home run in the bottom of the or top of the ninth. That game was essentially over, right? And then you substitute Blake Jackson in to account for the right-handed pitcher, and B-Jack gets on base, triple, drives home 1 run, and then Petrie does the rest, right? So it's really good showing. And then you put Garrett Gainey out there. I was in the photo tunnel for that game, so I saw Garrett Gainey, how he was preparing. I would have trotted him out there for that inning. Now, granted, he had a couple of high fly balls that were outs, and that would have concerned me a little bit. But again, and especially another thing with with putting Gainey back into the game at that point with 40 pitches, he's seen guys again, right? And one of Garrett Gainey's biggest weapons is the fastball, right? And so when you're able to see a fastball, especially in college, right? And Gainey throws a pretty hard fastball. It gets up to 96. He comes out of the bullpen, pumping gas. The type of player that you want in that situation, right? He was posing for pictures in the dugout. You need that kind of amped up and energy out of a guy that's coming out of the bullpen to shut down your arch rivals, right? And extras. So I would have trusted him to go out. Now, granted, South Carolina didn't have anyone warming up. I'm assuming they were going to try to after that inning, but I think I think that South Carolina just was fully expecting Gainey to get through that inning. Craig, what's going on, man? Hope you're doing well. Appreciate everyone tuning in tonight as well. But yeah, so game one, obviously not the way you want it to go. And then you go to Clemson, right? That's a tough road trip to have. Just right after the game, after you got beaten extras at Segra Park on Saturday. So really tough game. SQ started, and it didn't go quite your way. You had, again, a late push by Petrie, and it's not enough. It just wasn't enough this weekend. Now, Cotter, I'm not this baseball team. Now, granted, I think imposters for these two games. Yeah, absolutely. They just didn't have it at the right times. They rallied back, but I think last night was more of a moral victory. I don't know if any victory against your rival is a moral victory, but again, I think last night, if out of all the games, it is a moral victory. And then today, you want to wash today from your memory. It's just, again, it doesn't feel good when your rival takes you that far into a game, and it's close, right? And you led a little bit today, and you were right on the cusp. But again, you needed some more help out of your bats. Couldn't get it. And then the pitching was just off today a little bit more so than last night. Yesterday at Segra, it was your best pitchers that got dinged up. It was Veach and Matthew Becker, and Eli Jones let in 1 run, I believe, too. But solid stuff out of Eli Jones. Becker, I mean, had the one blunder, and then Veach also had a blunder as well. But that's kind of what you want out of your bullpen. To hold a roster like Clemson to only 4 yesterday is really darn good. Today got away from you again a little bit, but you still have that one more, right? You can't let him sweep at this point. You cannot let him sweep, and I think this baseball team is going to be a different team than what it is, in March versus compared to what it is in what it's going to be in May. So it's not over. This Palmetto series isn't over yet because South Carolina obviously has 2 midweek games, and then they play Longwood before they get the SEC schedule going. So it's going to be interesting to see how the rest of this schedule plays out, because you go into Longwood, you've got a couple midweeks, fine or not, and then you go on the road to Ole Miss in 2 weeks to start up SEC schedule. And one thing Jack and I talk about every week is like that. On our baseball show, The Hard Foul, is that if you go into SEC play, like, and anybody in the SEC can beat you, right? I think that's a big deal. But Ole Miss, if you roll into SEC play complacent, rallying off of your non-conference schedule, rallying off your non-conference schedule, it's anybody can beat you in this league. Anybody can beat you in the SEC for baseball. And let's see. Aaron says, why don't we make more lineup changes? We still got guys batting below 200. Yeah, that's because, I don't know if they're far enough into the year at this point, right? I think, you saw the situational changes with Kennedy Jones and Blake Jackson flipping. Aaron follows up, we need to bench guys like Nolan and Tippett. Yeah, Nolan, I mean, he showed a lot of good flashes. He's been decent in spots. Obviously, it's not quite adding up. It's getting to the time where you start questioning, benching these guys and moving it into or moving a rotation, up and in, because you want to have it figured out. You want to have a good starting nine when you go into SEC play. Yeah, there might be one or two changes, but and I'm not saying that Nolan or Tippett shouldn't be benched, and I think Tippett's been playing a little bit better as of late. I mean, he had a good day yesterday. Solid day today, but nothing too great. Just in general from Clemson today. But yeah, so I think Nolan a little bit more so than Tippett, the chief of the tribe, Tippett tribe, if you will. He started to pick things up, and I think this staff has a lot of faith in him. Same thing with Parker Nolan, right? His glove is really, really, really good. And you need a glove like that at second. They have a lot of faith that he can continue to hit for power, especially as the year goes along. So I think those two guys are going to keep giving another shot, but you might see one or two changes in the lineup, a little bit more of a rotation. I just don't think that they have enough guys that they trust necessarily to just thrust into the starting role. Now they are deep hitting wise. They've got a bunch of transfers, a couple of freshmen that they do trust, but yeah, just pump the brakes on figuring out the route, or saying a starter shouldn't but it's getting that time. I'm not saying you're completely out of your element with that take. And Martin says, I'm not overreacting to the baseball loss. College baseball is all about getting hot late in the season. Exactly, right? And that's why South Carolina was not in a rush to to push his, or to play this game right on the Friday game, the makeup. So yeah. And Craig says it was a 2-run game. It was 2 1-run games. Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing to shake your head about. And we knew, I talked about it on 107.5 The Game a little bit, is that this Clemson team is the best one that Carolina has seen in years, right? It is, they were loaded up and down. A lot of guys hitting over 200, 300, 400. And that was a lot of guys hitting over 300 entering this series. And a lot of guys were capable, and South Carolina saw that, a lot of guys capable of going yard as well. A lot of long fly balls in that game yesterday. But as I continue here, so I apologize. But yeah, no, 2 1-run games. It's nothing to shake your head about. And as Martin was saying too, it is really all about getting hot later in the season. It really is. And it's what you can kind of keep in front of you, and they're gonna get this bullpen and the starting rotation figured out, right? It's wasn't the best this weekend. Obviously, I think Saturday was your better pitching game out of any of the two. But again, you lost 2 1-run games to a really, really good Clemson team. And if you take a moral victory, again, I don't really. If you can take a moral victory from anything, it is that it was 2 1-run games. But you want to beat your arch rival, especially those ones from the upstate. But the pitching is going to figure itself out, right? Because you have Kimball and Becker both dealing with lat injuries. Both guys are prepared to, they're prepared to enter the season like starters, right? So both guys were prepared to go 6-7 innings, whatever. So I think the rotation when you enter SEC play, I don't know how it's going to look for Longwood, but it should be Eli Jones, Matthew Becker, and Roman Kimball, right? I think that's exactly what this staff wants. And that was the ideal rotation going forward. And then, you had to bring in a guy like Luedecke, who admittedly has battled, didn't have the best 2 games recently, he battled back. He's a guy that's going to be, if Becker comes back and fills that Saturday starter role, then SQ is going to be really good for you out of your bullpen. You need guys like that, right? That have proven experience as starters too, because, going back to Martin's comment too, it's like, it's whoever gets hot, and you need to have guys that can come out of the bullpen and throw long innings. And I think Luedecke is one of those guys, and probably will be one of those guys for this Gamecock baseball team going forward. Come out of the bullpen, throw a couple long innings if you need to. 2, 3, 4. If your starter gets shaken up early, that's going to happen, right? These teams in the SEC are really, really darn good. So it will happen if your starter has to go out early. That's why you have the bullpen. And Garrett Gainey yesterday, I was really, really, really darn impressed. Granted, he gave up the 1 home run, but that was at 40 pitches. He's been used to coming out of the bullpen. That guy can throw gas. That's 1 appearance. I don't think it's anything really that anybody needs to get on him for or anything like that. Jacob says, two great teams, the competition will only help us. Absolutely. Like, this is the correct take here. It was a really good series. And again, Clemson, both teams were really into that game yesterday as well. But, I really didn't, both teams celebrated as hard as you should in the Palmetto series. I heard some people talking about how Clemson was celebrating a little hard, and rightfully so, a little bit in that game. But then as soon as Petrie hit that home run, everything was kind of back level. I think even after the game, there wasn't really any as much jawing back and forth. Both teams just kind of had a mutual respect, and both teams kind of understand how good each other are too, right? If one team was better than the other, it'd be a blowout. So should be again, I think it's really good competition, and Clemson's probably better than a couple teams in the SEC too. Like, I'm just going to say this for just a baseball stake, not even from a football standpoint, but from a baseball, they're probably better than a couple teams in the SEC in your own conference. So, and might be another team that you see lining up, getting ready for regional or getting ready to go to Omaha, right? So it's good that you saw them. It's good what what's expecting, and then again later in the season, you're gonna be able to schedule this game out, and schedule this game when you're ready to go, when you can fit it in at Founders Park too. And so, yeah. Nick says, biggest problem is that we keep too many people on the bases when we need runs. Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that this team is working on, right? I think that they are part of their strategy too, is right. It's the fine line between being waiting for your pitch and being kind of a defensive hitter, and then also to just taking your shot, right? So you can't wait for your opportunity for so long. He's either going to strike you out or walk you, right? But this team is looking for, the plate discipline is huge. It's a huge factor, leading the country in walks. I don't know if they still are after this Clemson series. The stats haven't necessarily updated yet, but this team, plate discipline versus actually like swinging, Nick, like you were talking about, keeping too many people on the base pass, right? You can load them up and have all the plate discipline you want, but it's all about bringing them home. And I think we saw it for the first couple, games this season. In the first two weekend series, I think we saw it. Play discipline. You got guys on base, and then you stepped up and you ripped them home. And that's where the run rules came in. This team can add up runs quickly if you let them, right? If the opposing pitching staff lets them. So, Nick, I think it's really about finding a balance of swinging for the fences and swinging when you need to, and plate discipline. And but a big strategy, and doing photography and stuff like that, being close to the dugout, just seeing that like they're on deck talking about like, all right, this guy's just a little wild. Like, hey, like don't be afraid to take your walk and load him up for the guy behind you. It's a certain level of trust that this baseball team has, that goes a long way. So I think that's the foundation that you need to for March, but you do have to figure this out, and just being selective with your pitches. Play discipline goes a long way, but you do have to swing eventually. Eric says, Tuesday game be interesting. If we struggle to hit, that would be bad. Yeah, I would agree. I think, you need a statement on Tuesday and Wednesday. And if you do struggle to hit, it is kind of a concern going forward, especially because you have one more weekend series until you're in to SEC play against Ole Miss. Like, there is one more non-conference schedule. And, I don't think they're going to blow it against Longwood. Right. They should sweep, headed into Ole Miss again, that following weekend. And I think there's a midweek game in between that and SEC play, but I agree. Like, it is kind of excuse me. It will be a trend, if you will, if the hitting can't continue on Tuesday. Pitching wasn't the issue. Hitting 108 with runners on base was the issue. Yeah, absolutely, Gamecock fan. I think you're hitting the nail on the head there. You need to have better, execution with runners on base. And I think give shout out to Clemson too. I think their defense, especially yesterday, their defense really, really led the way. A team that had been leading the ACC in errors entering the series, they were really, really, really good on the base pass, and then just defensively in general, right? Didn't make any errors. They were really darn good with just everything defensively, and kind of just you're eliminating their mistakes, right? Because I talked about it with Tyler Head on 107.5 The Game. It was about that. If Clemson adds up mistakes, especially in a rivalry like this, it's tough because the errors turn into 1 and 2, and especially in high pressure situations in a rivalry like this, it will add up. and then the runs will turn into 3 and 4 and 5. So give credit to Clemson defensively, right? The hitting wasn't great, but they made a lot of nice plays, especially at shortstop. Yesterday, that didn't really allow South Carolina's momentum to get going because, again, I think, hitting 108 when you got guys on base, sometimes South Carolina will have a single, advance guys back over and load them up. No opportunities. It was a ground out into a double play. It felt like quite a bit yesterday. So, Clemson pitching has been great too this year. So, credit to them, but you do have to be better. Bird Two Fly says I turned on noties and it didn't notify me. What the heck? I must be a YouTube thing. Not necessarily sure. Hopefully it's fixed next week. Take what the pitcher gives you. Yeah, absolutely, Martin. Quite literally. It's Petrie. A lot of this roster's good at it. They just need to get better at waiting for their pitch, and then also you do have to stretch for some. You are going to have to force some swings if it's close, right? And that's where coming into the runners on base, right? If there's something that you like, don't wait. Just, swing it. And I wish hitting a baseball were that simple sometimes, but it's not. What was the thought process behind bringing Monty Lee in the hitting coach if he didn't cut it at Clemson? It's a guy that, has a lot of history at South Carolina. He's done great recruiting. And for your baseball program, he knows what winning was like at South Carolina. I think he's changed the hitting. The hitting was a big issue with, hitting was a big issue before Monty got here, and I think the hitting's gone up. Pitching seems to be solid. Batters got to follow it up though. Yeah, absolutely, and that comes with it, right? That's just comes with the nature of the spring. You're going to have ebbs and flows, and that is the nature of the spring. Ebbs and flows and all that. You want to get that out of non-conference schedule when the hitters are going well, or when you want to go into conference schedule with both your pitching and your hitting on fire, right? And so it is one of those things in college. It's one of the harder things in college baseball too, because I've you see a lot of teams going to Omaha or whatever the regionals with their pitching really hot, and then their bats aren't alive. So it's something South Carolina has to watch out for. We're going to get to some Mike Furrey talk in a minute after we finish up baseball. Martin says give Clemson their flowers. Absolutely. I firmly agree. They played a really good series, right? I played just a little bit better than you did. These teams are pretty evenly matched as well. So again, really toughly contested series, and it's should be a pretty good one. Pretty good. A lesson for this team going forward. Losing to your arch rivals. It's not going to leave a good taste in the mouth by any means. But I don't think it's anything. It was going so well with basketball this weekend, but baseball, is it too much to have one of the men's teams beating Clemson this season? I've had enough with football and basketball. Yeah, absolutely. It's crazy because the basketball and the baseball team can't seem to find a win on the same day. Basketball team won last Saturday. They got the job done against Texas A&M. Yeah, it was Texas A&M. And then baseball gets almost run ruled by Belmont. So against Clemson and just, those two teams winning on the same day. I don't know what it is, something in the water maybe. Those teams just can't find a way to win on the same day. And against Clemson, you didn't win the series, right? But I still think you take the game at Founders. It's not over. And, we're at the point in the Palmetto series rivalry with all sports too, that, you're just trading blows, football, basketball, baseball, right? You're going back and forth. And I know Clemson's had that run in football that was pretty big, but I think this rivalry just across the board too. All sports are kind of leveling up a little bit. Clemson football is going down, so it's just going to be one of those years where it just goes back and forth. I think. James Smith says this makes me sick to my stomach. Yeah, I'm assuming this to Clemson, the loss to Clemson. I wouldn't be too worried about it, James. This team has a lot of baseball to play. Not too worried about Clemson, Martin says, and not thinking about how South Carolina can improve, and now thinking about how South Carolina can improve. Comparison is the thief of joy. Absolutely. And Clemson's been on their own schedule, right? They've been playing their own amount of games and stuff like that. They had their wake-up call in 18-1 to Kennesaw State. So, different tracks for different teams. Again, I talked about those ebbs and flows of every season and just college baseball in general. Both of these teams are on different tracks. So it's going to be quite interesting to see how the rest of the season goes. So Mike Uva is about to jump on with us here and talk about Mike Furrey being hired as the wide receivers coach at South Carolina. We were at his presser on Thursday. There's something on this show I said to keep an eye out for because Shane was going to make a hiring before spring break. And so, my initial reaction from the hiring, I think it's a great hiring. Number one, it's a tough situation when James Coley leaves you to go to Georgia, and I talked about it here on this week's show, or on this show last week, right? It's always going to be tough to swallow when you get passed up, right? But Georgia, if you look at what Georgia has a room full of 5 stars ready to go, fully developed at the top of college football. I don't know who says no to that. It's realistically like I really don't. It's hard to say no to. But what Shane Beamer did, and Shane Beamer and staff and Dowell Loggins give credit to, everybody in this building where it gives credit to. But Shane Beamer acted fast and he got the right guy, right? I think you needed a guy that checks the box with development. And we can I do want to address, Shane Beamer talking about the wide receiver room. He was not taking a shot at the wide receivers as previously thought about by some other media members. Shane was that quote was not about the wide receivers within the building. If anything, it was a shot at Coach Justin Stepp. And so, just about how the development had been. And it's not an unwarranted shot by any means, right? I really don't think it's an unwarranted one, right? He said he was just displeased with the development of his wide receivers, and he's not lying. He's got a good point, right? You've only turned out probably one or two really, really good receivers in the last year, and that was because their own a lot of it was because of their own work ethic, and then recruiting classes would be half finished, right? Stuff like that. So it wasn't really a shot at anyone necessarily inside the building. May have been a shot at other people outside of the building. And again, I'm not 100% sure. I'm not Shane Beamer. I don't know what he was talking, like what exactly he meant in that situation. But again, I think, yeah, so again, it wasn't a shot at the wide receivers room. It was more of a shot. And so now you bring in a guy like Mike Furrey. And so it's he again, there's a lot there. Furrey started off as he's got a big long playing career. 98 catches in 2006 for the Detroit Lions, led the NFC. And he was brought in originally to mentor young receivers, and then all of a sudden he's leading the NFC in catches. That's pretty big deal. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to make sure I've got everything correct here. But yeah, and like I said, Mike Uva should be joining us here shortly as we talk about Coach Furrey. But yeah, and Nick Bob says that's just Tiger Phil stirring stuff up. Yeah, I love Phil. He's great, and I think he just misconstrued the message a little bit. So we do know what that means. Our new wide receivers coach sounds like a win, much better fit than Coley. Yeah, I think so. Just for where this program's at, right? You need to develop wide receivers. You need to produce guys to the pro level, right? And so I asked Shane about what, these hirings obviously happen so fast. Furrey got hired within a week. Elliott got hired within a week, but you needed to push to hire a receivers coach before spring break because now guys are on spring break. You didn't want guys to come in and be like, oh, hey, surprise. Here's your, wide receivers coach. Martin says Furrey seemed fired up and hungry, which I think is better for this team since they're all coming off 5 and 7 seasons than the nonchalant energy that Coley gives. Yeah, I think you're hitting the nail on the head here, Martin. Furrey, also has something to prove, right? Coming from Division II, as a head coach at the Division II level. This is first, I'm not saying first big shot. Like we know what kind of person he was as a player. He's seen the light, and I think that's part of the reason, part of the selling point for Mike Furrey is, he has been around a lot of studs in the NFL. Like my favorite thing that he talked about was gold jacket friendships, right? I don't have any gold jacket friendships because I'm, intern Joe Machika, and I didn't play in the NFL and stuff like that. And I was not around when they named Calvin Johnson Megatron. Like it's a crazy thing to just throw out there in a press conference. But, Coach Furrey's got a lot of them, which is craziness. So, he definitely won the press conference too, fired up and hungry. Yeah, absolutely. Because he's coming up from that Division II level. He's going to make a statement about just how, in that he belongs on this level to recruit. And number two, develop talent. He talked about seeing Mazio, or Shane talked about, Coach Furrey seeing Mazio, and how Coach Furrey told Mazio he's going to be the best coach to develop him to go to the NFL in the state of South Carolina. Now the fact that he gets to develop him at South Carolina is pretty ridiculous. It's pretty darn cool how that gets to come full circle. And, for a guy like Mazio Bennett too, right? Somebody who was homegrown, with South Carolina commitment through and through before he flipped to Tennessee, right? This was a guy that was on Twitter recruiting actively as hell with Dante Reno, somebody that really, really, really wanted to be at South Carolina before he flipped to Tennessee. And then as soon as he flipped back to South Carolina, was right back on that train, right? So from an endorsement from a player like Mazio Bennett, I think that's humongous, for the state of your program and stuff like that. So that's another big thing. And then I don't think anyone can argue we had little development at wide receiver. I don't think Beamer attacked any players. That he was blaming the coaching, not the talent, and taking responsibility. Exactly. This was, I think this is a perfect comment, perfect point, as we are now joined by our guest this evening, Mr. Mike Uva. Mike, talking about the Furrey situation, I did bring up, obviously, the comment that got a little misconstrued this weekend about the wide receivers. I think it was a little bbit more so, and like the comment is saying, about the coaching and not about the players themselves. How are you this Sunday evening? And I know this is kind of an interest, like a big thing to get thrust into, but offer me your initial thoughts after you tell me how you're doing.
No, I'm doing well, and I think, look, to take a step back a little bit, you look at, because I've been paying attention a lot to the combine this weekend. Nick Gargiulo finished up today. He was the fifth and final Gamecock to take part out in Indy. And I think what gets misconstrued a little bit is this. Bottom line is Shane Beamer wanted a new voice in that wide receiver room. Point blank, okay? Justin Stepp was able to do some good things as far as being able to develop several wide receivers. We saw that, of course, with Xavier Luedecke this past season. That's why I brought up the combine. What he was able to do this weekend was incredible, but it shouldn't surprise anyone that's been paying attention to Luedecke, especially over the last, I'd say, 8 months or so. But you can have two things still be true. And what I mean by that is you had some receivers. Obviously, we mentioned Luedecke. You look at what Juice Wells did. You look back to what Josh Vann did the previous year. Mm-hmm. But in terms of being able to get more from that room, that's what Beamer wanted to see. That's why they made the move they did with James Coley. Now, obviously, Coley didn't stick around much longer than just over 6 weeks, just over a month. But, and we've said this before, you can love Justin Stepp as a person. I think he's great. I think he's a good coach too. But bottom line is South Carolina felt like they needed a change in that room. And that's why they did that. We've mentioned this before. If anyone's been paying attention, and those who we've spoke with close to the program, if you go back the last 2 years, there was this feeling that Stepp would leave, that he had 1 foot in, 1 foot out the last 2 years. He was looking for jobs, even going back towards the end of this past season. Going back to last year, there's schools that talked to him. But he wasn't just going to leave for the sake of leaving. Now, certainly circumstances changed this offseason as he got bumped over from wide receiver coach to tight end. Certainly he wanted to be able to still coach wide receivers. But at the end of the day, that's how things played out. And Coley left. And I keep bringing that up, Joe, because I know some people look at the situation. They're like, well, you would have had Justin Stepp still. You may have had Stepp for at least one more year. I still feel like at the end of the season, if he were to have stayed, say they didn't move him over to tight ends, that I think he still would have left at the end of the year. But bottom line is this. You have a wide receiver coach in here who obviously a month ago wasn't your first choice, but at the same time too, I think this is a better fit. I think James Coley, from a resume standpoint, as far as proving success from a coaching standpoint, he has that over Mike Furrey. But at the same time, too, there's things that Furrey brings to the table that Coley, even throughout his 30-plus years of coaching, doesn't have. NFL coaching experience, 4 years with the Bears, being able to play in the NFL, being able to be a head coach, 2 different stints of 2 years at Limestone. So I bring those things up because I'm not going to sit here and pretend, because I know some people will do this in the fan base, that man, this is exactly what they were looking for. No, it wasn't. It wasn't. They were looking for James Coley. Just didn't work out because he decided to go over to Georgia. And I said, I want to correct something real quick. James Coley was in the NFL for 2 years as an offensive assistant. Wide receiver coach wise, Furrey has experience of being an actual wide receiver coach in the NFL. So just want to clear that up real quick. But I think Furrey's going to be a better fit here. And I think because of some of the things that took place this offseason with Pete Lembo leaving, obviously you bring in Sean Elliott, who has head coaching experience, but you bring another guy in that has head coaching experience. So a lot of moving pieces. I get it. 9 changes this offseason in some shape, way, or form to the coaching staff. But I feel like this is a better fit. And like I said, there was going to be a change at some point to the wide receiver room. Mm-hmm. The fact that Stepp decided to leave after being bumped over to tight ends, I get it. It's probably frustrated some in the fan base, especially because he's a local guy. But at the same time, too, the writing was on the wall. And I feel like based on the circumstances that played out with Coley leaving, South Carolina has a really, really good guy coming in. And on top of that, I think someone that's actually a better fit than Coley.
No, absolutely. I agree. I've been talking about the fit and certainly won the press conference too, Mike. But Big Red also brings up your point. You brought up the head coaching point as well. With so many former head coaches at a designated position, does this free Beamer to focus on building the program more and not having to approve each play? Yeah, absolutely. Just, and I think it takes, the pressure off Dowell too, because, if there's a play call or something, then Dowell doesn't necessarily, know what to do. And, he always will know what to do. He's going to call play, but right. If you, doesn't have 100% faith on a situation, his other head coaches and other just guys that know how to call plays on the staff, I think that's humongous. And it's been, kind of an MO of the staff, in terms of hiring this offseason.
The challenging part, and you can look at it multiple ways with what you just brought up. The challenging part, obviously, for Dow in this offense as a whole is the fact that you're replacing your quarterback, and not just a quarterback, but a real damn good one with Spencer Rattler. We've mentioned this multiple times this offseason. It won't be the last time that we bring it up. Regardless of if Sellers is the guy or not, and I think a lot of us assume that he will be the starter week 1, it's tough going from Rattler to Sellers. There's going to be some growing pains naturally. Whether that be Rattler going to, Dante Reno, or Rattler going to Ashford coming in. It doesn't matter who the quarterback is. You're going to have some growing pains because there were things that Rattler was just able to do because of his experience. Having said all that, and going back to the original point that you brought up, I think that certainly being able to have coaches that have experience of being in that head coaching seat. And that's one thing I put it out today in a story we did on Gamecock Central. If you're not a subscriber, sign up today for just $1 for the first month. But that was one thing that Furrey mentioned on Friday. And it was in regards to what he learned at Limestone that he believes is going to be able to help him here at South Carolina. And one thing in particular that he mentioned, he talked about the Division II jump, right? Going from D2, moving on up into the SEC, but he mentioned specifically the head coaching part too. And what he said was, quote, having experience as a head coach to me allows you to become a great assistant because you just kind of have an idea what you want your assistants to do. Take some of the burden off you, do your job, keep your office clean, look good, be presentable, get your players ready, all those good things. Those are things that I'm excited about that I get to do knowing what Shane Beamer's expectations are because of that chair, that head coaching chair. And obviously Sean Elliott understands that as well. So I think that is, again, the fact that we are in this offseason where Pete Lembo just left in the experience. 16 years of head coaching experience. You can't just replace that overnight. And the other part about it too is, even though I think Shane has a lot of respect for Sean Elliott, I think he has a lot of respect for Mike Furrey, and I'm sure he's got a lot of respect for a lot of these coaches on the staff. But with the new faces, the new coaches here, there takes some humility in the sense that you have to develop a rapport quickly so you can be able to have that trust there, right? This past season, Dow Loggins comes in, and I think it was very evident that Beamer allowed Dal to be himself from a play calling standpoint. And I think he does this with a lot of his coaches. We know that towards the end of the season, defensively, there were reports that Beamer was the one that promoted the idea of making some tweaks defensively from a schematical standpoint, getting away from the 4-3 a little bit. But I bring that up because I think Beamer will allow Sean Elliott and allow Mike Furrey to be themselves. But how quickly does that happen? We saw it happen quickly with Dal last year. Does that remain the same now that Spencer's gone? That you don't have Xavier Luedecke? So these are things that I think it's also important to bring up, Joe, that you have guys that have head coaching experience, and that's awesome. And I'm sure Shane would be the first one to admit it comes back down to him. You know, how quickly is he going to be able to develop that trust with them? He can say it, but, you know, kind of like with the quote we've talked about with Mike Tyson, everyone has a game plan until you get punched in the face. How quickly will that trust truly be earned? And the only thing that I can say to that is that doesn't happen overnight. That happens over time. So we'll see that obviously in the spring. We'll see it throughout the offseason. We'll see it during fall camp. But those things are something to pay attention to as well.
Yeah, most definitely. Again, Mike Uva joining us real quick at the end of the show, talk the Mike Furrey hiring. Mike, before we wrap things up and close the show, I do want to know, like, obviously, you know, your final thoughts, obviously, on the Furrey hiring, but then, you know, him as a coach, like, would you play? I certainly would play for him. Would you play for him?
He reminds me a lot. He reminds me a lot of my college coach for my senior year. And I know I've mentioned his name a couple times in some of the shows I've done, Bob Chesney. He went to Holy Cross for 6 years, won the Patriot League title the last 5, and now he's the new head coach at James Madison. I bring that up because what stands out to me about Furrey is that he has the energy that everyone's talked about. I mean, we had former players hop on our show. I think it was on Tuesday. Tuesday is when it was announced, or Thursday, whenever it became official. Maybe I think it was Thursday last week. And we had players hop on, some parents hop on, and that was one thing that people were saying during the GC Live. Energy, energy, energy. You could see it. But I think the other thing that really stands out to me, and the reason why I bring up Chesney, you can see why guys want to play for him. And that's why from the Division II jump, and I've mentioned it, I mean, never mind Chesney, Curt Cignetti, what he was able to do in the Division II ranks. Then he made the climb up to James Madison. Now he's over at Indiana. Brian Kelly, I mean, he turned Grand Valley State into a Division II powerhouse. And then obviously he climbed on up, went to Cincinnati, went to Notre Dame. Obviously he's at LSU now. But I bring these guys up because it's been done before. We've seen coaches have success. And the difference here is he's not going from head coach to head coach. He's going from head coach to being a positional coach, where he's not going to have to deal with, and he even mentioned this the other day, he's not going to have to deal with wearing 30 hats. He's still going to have a lot of responsibilities, right? Especially in today's era of coaching college football. It's a hell of a lot more. Not that it's just been X's and O's, but it's a hell of a lot more than just X's and O's now. But the reason I bring that up is from a recruiting standpoint, and no disrespect to Limestone, okay? But to sell, not just the players, but you look at that coaching staff.
That's what I was thinking, Mike.
To come play college football in Gaffney, South Carolina. No disrespect to the fine folks of Gaffney. But to sell that, especially to people that aren't from this area, to sell that to people from out of state, and not just anyone from out of state, but talented freaking players. I mean, we heard it in the press conference that Mazio Bennett was being recruited by him, that Furrey wanted him to go. Like, he was able to recruit guys. And that, what that shows me is he was able, and Chesney did this. And when you think of Brian Kelly, Curt Cignetti, if you go back and look at some of the players that they recruited when they were coaching Division II, they were able to get players. And Limestone has the same right now. If you go look at their roster, they have guys there that have no business being there. And what I mean by that is they're talented where they could go play at a higher level, but yet they wanted to play for that man. And they obviously have tremendous coaches there as well. So I bring all that up, Joe, because I think, to me, at least it stood out to me, that's what makes him such a good recruiter. Now, you have to be coaching in the SEC. You got to be going up against the best of the best now. But I think what we're going to see with Furrey is that he's going to be able to get those guys. And oh, by the way, he's also someone that played in the NFL for about a decade, right? 8 years, had about 100 catches. What was it? That 98, 96 catches during that 2006 season.
Yep.
2006, 98 catches with the Lions. So you want to learn how to play the position? This guy. And I think, it's evident why players wanted to play for him at Limestone. And I think he's going to be a tremendous asset here for multiple reasons. But I think he's going to be a really good recruiter. And he also understands how to make things happen when you don't have all the bells and whistles around you. And that's not just a Limestone thing. That's Division II. The majority of Division II schools, even some FCS programs, certainly in comparison to a program like South Carolina, you don't have all the bells and whistles. Yeah. So you really have to sell development. So NIL, we've talked about it, certainly changing the game, but how do you combat that? And I feel like we've mentioned it multiple times, is selling the idea of being able to get developed so you can go play at the next level. And South Carolina certainly has the experience with every coach on this staff outside of Shane Beamer. We're talking about assistants, at least. Everyone has some type of connection to the NFL, whether the fact that they played in the NFL or whether the fact they coached in the NFL.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, most definitely. Big Red, I also hate to say it, but you're kind of hitting the nail on the head here. I know as a Gamecock fan, nobody wants to hear this, but does stacking of experienced coaches kind of mirror the way that the Upstate team built their championships teams coaching-wise? Yeah, absolutely. I'd say, from that standpoint, yeah, and that's just kind of the nature of college football too, right? You need to have your coaching staff stacked with experience anywhere you go. But I agree. I think, Clemson, perfected it really. Bama has always done it. Your New England Patriots, you need to have success with a lot of, experienced coaches who have seen a thing or two. Right. So I think that's big. And, to your point about recruiting without resources, I think, to be able to do that at Limestone is, a pretty good testament. And then, you also kind of needed a coach to come light a fire under some of these guys' asses, right? You need competition in the wide receiver room because you have a bunch of transfers and then, a lot of young guys, right? So it needs to be a really, really darn good competition to see who's going to start for, your team in the SEC, right? It's a very coveted job. There's not a lot of wide receivers in the SEC. There's not a lot of people who can, say that they play wide receiver in the SEC. So you need a guy that's going to certainly ignite the competition. Coach Furrey certainly will. So yeah, I agree with everything that you said, Mike, and more. Anything else before we wrap things up?
No, I mean, I think, look, it's been a crazy shoot, really 2 months going back to January 3rd. It's been a crazy 2 months for South Carolina as far as moving pieces. I mean, we can go back even further if you want to talk about the transfer portal and the nearly 24 players that South Carolina brought in and some of the players that left, of course. But I think when you look at this coaching staff, and again, I'm not saying that what South Carolina envisioned, especially going back to January 3rd. And January 3rd was really the beginning of changes because Montario Hardesty was let go. And then, of course, that was followed by Jody Wright becoming a head coach at Murray State, Pete Lembo becoming a head coach at Buffalo, and some other musical chair action going on in that coaching staff. But I think all in all, when you look at what the staff is right now, I don't want to sit here. I think talk is cheap as far as saying, all right, this is a better staff than where it was a year ago. I think from a positional standpoint, looking at some of the positional rooms, I think the talent is deeper, more experienced, right? We could talk about the running back room. We could talk about offensive line, defensive tackle, edge room. I think I mentioned linebackers, right? So I say that because they certainly have upgraded certain positions. Now you bring in some new faces, some new sparks, right? And you have an opportunity now to really be able to get things headed in the direction that you want them to. Certainly coming off the disappointing year last year, 5-7, and not being able to make a bowl game after what I've said before, Joe. We've talked about it off camera, but South Carolina, in my eyes, and I know people hate to look at it this way, and Shane probably would roll his eyes if he heard me say this, but in a lot of ways, South Carolina arrived early. And what I mean by that is being able to do what they did in year one and year two. I think naturally, because the bar goes up, I think people had higher expectations than what the reality was, especially for a team that was going to be really young in year 3. Never mind the fact of the injuries piling up. That's not an excuse. That's just the reality of it. So,
it's definitely.
But because of how things have played out, year 1, year 2, and then obviously taking a step back in year 3, you need to be able to make progress in a big way this year. And I think South Carolina has the pieces to be able to do that. Obviously, a very difficult schedule, but then again, it's the SEC. I think this is a team that is going to be able to improve in a lot of areas because of the talent, the depth, the experience, but also because of the coaches that they've been able to bring in. But I don't want to go as far right now because, again, I think it's talk is cheap to say, okay, this is a better coaching staff than where it was at a year ago. I think there's some coaches here that will be better fits, and I think they'll be able to bring a new voice, a much needed new voice in a lot of those rooms. But we'll wait and see how things play out before we, anoint anyone, king or any improvements as far as coaching staff goes.
Absolutely. Well, I love it. Martin says SEC basketball championship scenario. I don't have the exact scenario off the top of my head. Plain and simple, they just got to win. Just keep winning. But that will do it for us here on the walkthrough. I appreciate everyone tuning in. Again, dealing with me going solo for the first part of this episode. Again, trying something new. And then we're just going to keep integrating guests through and through. So appreciate everyone tuning in again tonight. Have a good week, and we will talk to you guys on Tuesday.